It is the 1st of June, 1970. What is about to happen here will be the beginning of the most controversial legal battle of the decade. A battle that will shake the Canadian justice system to its foundations. The police, however, know nothing of all this. They are here for a routine raid on the clinic of an abortionist.
Did you not think that sooner or later you were going to get raided?
Well, it was in the back of my mind that we might be raided one day, but since I had been operating already for 2.5 years with a tremendous record, with people coming from all over Canada and the United States at that point, with hospitals and doctors and social agencies referring people, it was an open secret that I was working here and doing abortions.
But after 2.5 years, the secret has become too open. Shortly before noon, the police close in. It's not that a patient complained. In fact, it's the clinic's good reputation that has made the Montreal police look the other way for so long. But now the local cops are being pressured by the RCMP.
We want to know what you're doing here.
The RCMP have received complaints from the FBI about the number of American patients coming to the clinic. And so a deal has been made with the boyfriend of a patient who has had an abortion here this morning.
I'm asking you some questions.
I don't have to answer any questions.
Oh yeah, you have to answer a question. For your name.
Well, that's my ID there. Just read it.
You got some ID? Did you work here?
Je vais répondre en présence de mon avocat.
Why can't you be a bit quieter than you are?
With the pressure coming from the RCMP, the Montreal police finally have no choice but to act.
Okay. That's the money.
The doctor has been set up. The boyfriend paid for the abortion with marked money.
Okay, that's much better.
But don't you think that you forced them into a position where they had to raid you?
Well, I don't know whether they had to act at all. I mean, it was obviously providing a medical service which was unique and necessary.
Which was also against the law.
Bon, tu arrives avec ça?
No, okay, stop.
Wait. Take the wrench.
The police check the drains for evidence and question the frightened patients in the waiting room.
Could you be a little bit more civil about the whole thing instead of upsetting all these patients?
Ça sert à quoi, ça? OK. Take it. Barré, ça? C'est barré, ça? Bon, veux-tu ramasser tout ça, mettre ça dans les sacs?
No, you are not. No one give him anything.
The raid is a nightmare for the patients. But for Morgentaler, at last, the waiting is over.
Part of me said, well, the showdown finally has come. The battle is really beginning in earnest.
Please, may I have some pieces of identification?
And the second thing that I thought about is sort of like a relic of the times of the concentration camp and the ghetto, where we didn't have enough food, and wherever something was happening where you'd taken away, you'd expect to be maybe 12 or 24 hours without food. First thing I did, I went over to the fridge and I took a sandwich. This was the way to prepare yourself for a long ordeal.
I've got a job to do.
Même pas le droit de manger un sandwich?
The long journey that brought Henry Morgentaler to Canada began with the deportation to Auschwitz and Dachau. He and his younger brother Mike survived. His mother, father, and sister did not. In 1950, Morgentaler and his Polish wife Eva made their way to Montreal, looking for a new life. At first, everything goes well. Morgentaler gets into medical school, graduates in 1955, and builds up a thriving practice in the working-class East End of Montreal. Morgentaler had found success, or so it seemed.
6 years after I became a doctor, I went into psychoanalysis. And I went into psychoanalysis because by that time I had achieved almost everything that I set out to achieve. I became a medical doctor. I had a successful practice. I had a wife and 2 children. I had a mistress. I had material success. And somehow, deep down, I was unhappy. I was bored and unhappy.
The analysis profoundly changes Morgentaler. He separates from his wife, sets out in search of a cause, and finds one in abortion. At first, Morgentaler sticks to making speeches, but as his celebrity grows, more and more women come to him asking for help. Finally, in March 1968, Morgentaler draws the curtains of his clinic, takes the phone off the hook, and performs an abortion on the teenage daughter of a friend of his. And then he calls a lawyer.
And I say to him, look, I've started doing abortions. I came to ask you how to minimize the danger of being caught and being tried and being convicted. So he says, well, I think what you should do is not have witnesses. You don't let in the husband, don't let in a friend, don't let in a sister. What I did, I just disregarded his advice.
For 2.5 years, Morgentaler's gamble appears to pay off until the police arrive at the clinic on this June morning in 1970. Morgentaler has no idea what lies ahead. Hoping for a quick resolution, he hires Claude Armand Chapard, one of the best defense lawyers in the country. Chapard, however, advises Morgentaler to stall.
I'll put it to you bluntly. I felt that if I had Dr. Morgentaler tried, when they were trying to try him, it would have been pretty close to a kangaroo court. Because at the beginning, it was a very lonely battle, with almost everybody either being against or unsympathetic.
Are you feeling anything?
No, nothing.
Good. Well, I'm doing
While he waits for his trial, Morgentaler defiantly continues doing abortions.
When I was in general practice, I came to a girl about 1 o'clock in the morning. She's white as a sheet. She had had a botched abortion. She was near death. She got about 4 bottles of blood immediately, and we tided her over.
Just breathe.
Yeah. All the big hospitals had complete wards of botched abortion patients, and many died, and many were injured, and many had hysterectomies.
You're not pregnant anymore. Okay, it's all over.
Feeling all right?
Okay. Yes.
Outraged by Morgentaler's open defiance of the law, opponents of abortion protest across the country and set up a 24-hour vigil outside his clinic.
This is little Marcus Richardson, born at 20 weeks gestation, which means 4.5 months into his mother's pregnancy. Our states and Canada would permit killing of this little one because they say he's not human, is he?
Our unwanted children will be joined by their unwanted elders. Euthanasia will have as many headlines in a few years as abortion is getting now.
As the debate heats up, anti-abortion groups start to apply political pressure. They find a sympathetic listener in Justice Minister Otto Lang.
I disagree completely with the proposition that it's just a decision for the mother. I think that the state has the right and the obligation to decide how far it has to protect the unborn child. And at the moment, we have done that by transferring a certain responsibility to the hospital committee to protect the unborn child by allowing an abortion only if the life or health of the mother is really seriously in danger.
But no one's satisfied. Morgentaler says the law doesn't go far enough. The other side says it goes too far.
The question that we'd like to pose on this whole abortion controversy is very simple.
When does human life begin? Is this human life? And if it is, can we kill an unborn baby to solve the social problem of his mother?
But despite the anti-abortion campaign, 6 months after the raid, the clinic is still open for business. Several of his nurses are also facing criminal charges, but no one has any regrets. And now, women's groups across the country come to Morgentaler's support. One winter passes, and then another. Shepard and his client are frequently called into court. Each time, Shepard manages to find a hole in the Crown's case against the doctor. But Morgentaler is growing impatient and more troubled by the accusations that he's hiding behind his lawyer.
Between 1970 and 73, you stalled. You kept Henry out of court. Do you think that that's the proper use of the legal system?
I consider it my duty to put at the disposal of my clients every advantage that the legal system provides them with. I did not do anything illegal. I did not do anything improper. I did not invent proceedings. I did not invent witnesses. I did not create alibis. Sitting as an attorney general on the other side, I would have been very unhappy about all of these things. And he tried the reverse.
The Attorney General is Jérôme Choquette, a devout Catholic who is against abortion. He is indeed unhappy with the delays, but Shepard's tactics leave him little room to maneuver. The police are also in a dilemma. Though they know Morgentaler is breaking the law, cops like Inspector Jean-Claude Rondeau have seen the results of too many botched abortions.
So when we got to the morgue and we came into the room itself where they had performed the autopsy, as we got closer to the table where the woman was laid out, I realized that woman, I had known that woman. She was part of our group, our teenager group. She had been one of my first girlfriends. It was really quite a shock.
By the summer of 1972, abortion has become a national debate. And though Gallup polls show a majority of the population favor more ready access to abortion, anti-abortionists stage a massive rally in Ottawa, delivering 1 million signed petitions to the front door of Parliament. It is up to MP Grace McInnes to raise the contentious issue in the House.
They were always receptive and well-behaved when I was speaking on any other topic. But if I got onto birth control, contraceptives, abortion, anything like that, they became just like a lot of little giggling schoolboys. There was veiled hostility and embarrassment and a wish that both the speaker and the issue would go away.
There are so many pros and cons. I don't know. If men could get pregnant, I'm sure the law could have been changed a long time ago.
This tiny pair of human feet, perfectly formed of a 10-week developing baby.
But the law hasn't been changed, nor does it seem likely that it will be. It has been 3 years since the police raided his clinic, and though his strategy has so far kept him out of jail, Morgentaler now wonders if he's made a mistake.
And in a sense, there was a kind of ambiguity between the ideology of my family and the socialist movement, which had slogans of fighting and struggle. But somehow, on a personal level, I didn't follow that. I think part of the reason why I did it was to prove to myself that I was not a coward. That finally I was doing something which took a lot of courage.
Ever since he survived the concentration camps, Morgentaler has been taking risks to prove to himself that he's not a coward. His brother Mike was also in the camps, but the experience taught him to avoid risks. Mike now tries to dissuade Henry from doing anything rash, but Henry has made up his mind. He calls his lawyer to warn him of his plans.
He said, don't do it. You're going to admit publicly that you've done something of which you're accused. Nobody does that. Nobody ever does that. I said, well, I don't care. If it comes to trial, I'll admit it anyway. My defense is not that I haven't done abortions. And he said, yeah, but you can't do things like this. You'll provoke the authorities. It's really gambling with your life and with your freedom. And if you want to gamble, go to Las Vegas. So I said, this kind of gambling that I'm doing now appeals to me much more. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I wish to share a secret with you tonight, which many people have known for a long time.
During a speech in Toronto on March the 16th, 1973, Morgentaler makes the surprise announcement.
That in the last 5 years, from 1968, I have performed 5,000 abortions in my clinic in Montreal, in defiance of the abortion law, which I consider to be unjust, unfair, restrictive.
To Morgentaler's dismay, there is still no reaction from the police. He decides to raise the ante.
Dr. Henry Morgentaler is in the news again. Last night, the CTV television network ran film of Morgentaler performing an illegal abortion at his Montreal clinic. It's the latest act of defiance in Morgentaler's campaign to liberalize Canada's abortion law. 2 months ago, he announced that he has performed more than 5,000 illegal abortions since 1969. Despite strong support for his stand, the telecast of an abortion on Mother's Day launched an immediate wave of protest. Calls poured into CTV offices.
At last, the authorities have no choice but to pay attention. Federal Justice Minister Otto Lang gets in touch with the provincial Justice Minister.
Justice Minister Jerome Choquette came under heavy fire from the opposition. He's promised to investigate the matter. In Montreal,
Jerome Choquette orders a second raid. The man in charge, Inspector Jean-Claude Rondeau.
The Quebec Justice got in touch with the our chief of police at the time.
So the pressure was coming from on top.
Right.
By committing a crime on national television, Morgentaler has made his contempt for the law too public to be ignored. The first raid 3 years ago was routine. The second raid is planned down to the last detail.
We sat down with the police legal advisor. We agreed on what we needed. We checked the house first for a period of time to see how many women were coming in, going out. We had policemen sitting on a patio near Dr. Morgentaler's house. We checked the garbage for names, evidence.
Were you looking for any fetuses in the garbage?
We did. We didn't know how it was disposed of.
The second raid takes place on August the 15th, 1973. Morgentaler is released on bail, and the strategy sessions begin. The doctor is convinced that all Shepard has to do is to persuade the jury that the abortion laws are unjust. But, as Shepard tells him, the law doesn't work that way.
Things aren't that simple in a court case. You can't just get up and tell a story. You have to have a legal justification for telling the story.
Well, there must be a way. I mean, I don't know these legal things, but I'm sure you find a way of bringing it across.
Well, yes, we have 2-3 defenses available, but you sort of have to pin it into a legal niche. And that's
going into that case, what was your biggest worry?
Dr. Morgentaler, if you want. He's a very determined person, and unlike many other clients, he's a full participant in his defense. I can only think of one thing at the present time, and that's the defense of necessity.
Faced with a client who wants to turn the trial into a public debate, Shepard and his team of lawyers are having a hard time finding a viable defense.
The only other thing I can think of, and I came across it in the general section of the criminal code, is section 45. And I'll summarize. If you do a surgical operation properly and for the benefit of the person, and that it's reasonable to do so in all the circumstances, you're protected against criminal prosecution. Perhaps we can try and sneak in under that.
But I get a feeling that this would only apply in cases of emergency.
I think our problem is to get the jury to hear Dr. Morgentaler's story. If we can't convince them with that, no convoluted argument is going to achieve it.
But his story, if you look at it, wasn't all that great. He was a Jewish doctor working in Catholic city. He was doing abortions, which is not a pretty operation to most people. And he was making a lot of money doing it. Why did you think the jury was going to find that so attractive?
Well, first of all, that's not the story I refer to. The story I refer to is why women needed abortions, why women could not get them within the framework of the law, the hypocrisy we were all surrounded with, the class structure differences, how the richer women had access and the poor women did not.
This is the story that Shepard will tell the 12 members of the jury who enter Montreal's Palais de Justice on October 18, 1973. In the end, Shepard has decided to gamble that a French-speaking Catholic jury from the East End will be sympathetic to a rich Jewish doctor from Westmount. These jurors may be more conservative than middle-class English jurors, but they are also the people who suffer most when safe abortions are not available.
I wanted plain, practical, down-to-earth people. I preferred them to be married. In fact, I thought it'd be ideal if they had children. I wanted a jury consisting of people who would empathize with the patient involved.
Shortly before 10 a.m., Morgentaler and his lawyer pull up in front of the courthouse. The defense Shepard has chosen has never been used before, and he has no idea if it will even be accepted by the court. The courtroom is packed with spectators who've lined up since early morning. Precisely at 10 a.m., the 11 men and 1 woman of the jury take their places. The trial begins with Crown Prosecutor Louis-Guy Robichaud's opening address to the jury.
Alors, Madame et Messieurs du jury, nous allons tenter de prouver.
Of the 13 separate charges against Morgentaler, the Crown has carefully chosen the most vulnerable. A 26-year-old English-speaking student from Sierra Leone who was picked up in the second raid.
À Montréal, où se trouve un genre de bungalow dans lequel l'accusé, M. Morgentaler, exerce une profession. Et que cette dame, Verona Parkinson...
Taken in for questioning, Verona Parkinson tells the police she tried several of the hospitals, but their waiting lists were all too long. It was the Montreal General that gave her Morgentaler's name. Parkinson is in Canada on a student visa. She is poor, ineligible for welfare, and very scared.
And she said, come on the 15th of August and bring $200. I told her I didn't have $200. And she said, well, bring what you have, and you can discuss it with the doctor. So I went there on the 15th of August.
Now, can you describe the pain, please?
Well, all I know is it hurt a lot. I was squeezing the nurse's hand, and I was squeezing it very hard. I didn't want to cry out because there were other patients waiting outside.
And in what part of your body did you feel the pain?
There, where the operation was happening.
Excuse me, Mademoiselle Parkinson, but we...
Robichaud, a senior Crown prosecutor, has from the start seen the trial as a simple matter of proving that a law was broken.
In what?
He now bears in on Verona Parkinson, determined to make the most of his star witness.
And Where did you have this operation?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's the uterus, but it was down there.
While some of the spectators are outraged at the treatment of Verona Parkinson, passions on both sides are running high.
A woman that was close to Dr. Morgentaler came to tell me that, you know, Mr. Radu, Dr. Morgentaler has performed abortion on policeman's wife and policeman's daughters. We really wouldn't want to be forced to reveal the names of those people.
You said that once you discovered from the pregnancy test that you were pregnant, you decided to have an abortion. Why is that?
Well, $200 a month is barely just enough to live on. Because financially, I couldn't handle the cost of taking care of a child.
Do you know the doctor who's sitting with the Crown and the police?
The prosecution has a strong case, but on the fifth day, Shepard casually asks about a doctor who has been sitting with the Crown since the trial began.
Jacques Desrosiers.
Well, he's the chief of gynecology at Maisonneuve Hospital. He referred cases to me.
He was sitting right with the police throughout the trial, and knowing what was coming, because I was ready for him, I did not miss an opportunity to ostentatiously draw the jury's attention to him without saying why. You know, I would greet the Crown attorney very publicly and not forget his partner in crime, if I can say so. I just wanted the jury to never lose sight of this doctor, that he was there and that he was very important. They had no idea why I thought he was important.
Voici la machine. C'est une machine qui produit une pression négative.
The following day, Dr. Desrosiers is called to the stand.
Un avortement. Ici, vous avez le tube.
He is indeed a highly regarded Montreal gynecologist who has been advising the Crown since before the raid.
Le démarreur qui produit.
Today he has been called to demonstrate Morgentaler's vacuum aspirator.
C'est probablement la meilleure machine qui se trouve actuellement sur le marché.
Docteur, peut-on faire fonctionner cette machine? S'il vous plaît.
I think that he's one who answered my questionnaire that I sent out to all the doctors, asking them about the quality of care, how many complications. And I think that I remember that he answered it. And I'm going to look it up in my papers.
If you can get a copy and fast. Docteur, avant d'aller plus loin, je vous montre ce fameux questionnaire dont on a parlé ce matin. Est-ce qu'il n'est pas exact que c'est votre signature que l'on voit là-dessus?
Under examination, Dr. Desrosiers admits that he answered Morgentaler's famous questionnaire.
C'est exactement ma signature.
Ce qui n'est pas exact que lorsque...
More specifically, to a question regarding the quality of Morgentaler's work, he had responded with the word excellent.
Que vous avez répondu de votre main par le mot excellent.
Voyez-vous, le mot excellent veut dire par rapport à charcutier.
Worse still, the Crown's advisor had referred 8 of his own patients to Morgentaler for abortions.
Oui, et dans un temps où la loi, où l'amendement au code criminel n'existait pas.
Incredibly, one of the referrals was Desrosiers' own secretary.
Propre secrétaire au docteur Morgentaler.
Hein? Nous faisons une pratique, 9 médecins en groupe. Je n'ai pas de secrétaire particulière, comme vous, peut-être, pouvez en avoir une. Non,
Docteur,
je ne pense pas que
1970.
C'est possible.
What was devastating about his evidence that he had referred himself patients to Dr. Morgentaler, including his secretary, and had even sent a letter of congratulations to Dr. Morgentaler. You know, if you put a situation like that in the script, people would say you're exaggerating, but it actually happened.
And yet Desrosiers was like a lot of other people who take a strong moral stand against abortion. When it came down to one of his patients or his own secretary faced with an unwanted pregnancy, he sent her to Morgentaler's clinic.
The word go. It's goddamn weather, eh? You know, there's nothing to hide.
No.
But,
On the morning of day 11, Shepard and Morgentaler meet in the lobby of the courthouse and chat briefly.
impression that you're holding back anything.
No, that's
In about an hour, it will be Shepard's turn. After an opening statement and preliminary testimony, it'll be time to call Dr. Morgentaler to the stand.
Now, I have a good story to tell. I have nothing to hide.
And if there's anything illegal or any attempt at embarrassing you, leave it to me. I'll object. But remember that I really don't want to...
What is there that's illegal?
No, if a question is put to you
Oh,
that
I
is
see.
illegal,
I see what you mean. Yeah,
I will be objecting. And in any case, I'd rather let...
Madame et messieurs du jury, Maître Robichaud vous a dit que son seul problème, ou le seul problème que vous auriez à déterminer, était celui de...
Shepard's strategy takes the jury by surprise. He tells them that all of Robichaud's elaborate efforts were unnecessary. Dr. Morgentaler has never denied doing the abortion on Verona Parkinson.
Eh bien, moi, je vous dis très humblement que c'est le seul problème que vous n'avez pas à déterminer.
We had to convince the jury that it was necessary in the circumstances, as the law permits, to disobey the law.
Can a system of justice work that way, where individuals judge whether laws are absurd or not, and therefore whether or not they can break them?
Well, you know, I'll turn around. Can a system not exist where you can, at times, not break the law? Take a very simple example. Should you, as an ambulance driver in a grave emergency, respect the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit and not drive at 100 miles an hour if the circumstances are required? You may have to account for it. You may be tried for speeding, just as Dr. Morgentaler was tried for committing an illegal abortion. And anyone who has to go through what he went through to be able to prove he had the right to circumvent the law will tell you that it's not easy. It's very difficult.
Since the trial began, Morgentaler has been surrounded by friends, lawyers, and reporters. Now he waits alone for his cue. Under Shepard's examination, Morgentaler describes the problems that bring women to his clinic for abortions.
Docteur, je suis enceinte, il faut absolument que vous m'aidiez. Et puis, je disais à ces femmes-là, c'est vrai, je suis sympathique à votre cas, j'aimerais bien vous aider, mais...
Écoutez, là, je pense que je vais être obligé d'intervenir, votre...
But Robichaud sees where he's heading and interrupts. Once again, Robichaud states what he believes is the only question before the jury. Did Morgentaler perform an abortion on Verona Parkinson? The fact that Morgentaler believed the abortion law was unjust is irrelevant, Robichaud states. Changing the law is up to Parliament.
Et comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, il n'y a qu'une autorité qui fait la loi ici, et c'est le Parlement fédéral en matière de droit criminel.
Who is responsible for changing the law is really the issue in this case. What Morgentaler had done was to take matters into his own hands, deliberately breaking the law to try to force Parliament to act.
Necessarily help you. In other words, you're asking me to do things that normally a lawyer doesn't do, that don't necessarily help you. Most guys just want to be acquitted, but when it's your case, you want to have your cause upheld, and you insist on certain principles being maintained, and it's very difficult.
Well, I don't see why it should be more difficult, basically.
But Robichaud has never seen the case as a fight for a cause.
N'avez-vous pas pris position? Ne lui avez-vous pas...
And now, as he cross-examines Morgentaler, he goes back once again to the abortion of Verona Parkinson.
Non, je vois mon rôle en tant que médecin de procurer un avortement à ces patientes-là dans de meilleures conditions possibles.
When Morgentaler insists that the decision to have an abortion is up to the woman, Robichaud accuses him of providing abortion on demand and asks if he even tried to dissuade Verona Parkinson.
Non, je n'ai pas tenté de la dissuader.
Bon.
By day 15, both sides have presented their arguments. Robichaud has stuck strictly to the law. Shepard's appeal has been to the jurors' hearts. Now comes the summation.
Alors je vous demanderai, Madame et messieurs du jury, dans le sérieux de vos délibérations,
Robichaud tells the jury that just because an individual like Dr. Morgentaler disagrees with the law, that doesn't give him the right to break the law.
on a le droit de la transgresser. Que parce qu'on décore bien une clinique, ça devient légal.
Whether the clinic staff were caring or competent, whether the abortion was properly done, those questions are now irrelevant.
C'est de fausser le problème que de vous soumettre une proposition comme
What the jury has to decide, Robichaud insists, is simply whether or not Morgentaler broke the law.
L'accusé a-t-il violé la loi? Je vous remercie.
Madame et messieurs du jury,
Shepard's summation to the jury goes on for 5 hours.
représentez tous vos...
The main point of his argument is that Verona Parkinson needed the operation because she was alone and poor, and that Dr. Morgentaler was simply providing a necessary medical service.
Dans les procès par juré, c'est que les jurés...
And then Shepard deals his final card, the reason for having juries in the legal system.
Parce qu'ils sont, comme on dit, du monde ordinaire.
Jurors are ordinary people. They don't have law degrees. They don't spend their days in court like lawyers and judges. And so they judge not just on strictly legal grounds, but with their wisdom and with their hearts.
Arriver à de bonnes décisions pour des raisons qui m'auraient scandalisé comme avocat, mais qui me réjouissaient comme homme.
Over the years, Shepard tells them, he has seen many juries reach verdicts that tempered the strict letter of the law with common humanity. And while as a lawyer he may have disagreed, as a man those decisions caused him to rejoice.
Est-ce que cet homme est un criminel? Je vous remercie infiniment.
The trial is over, and there's nothing left to do but wait.
Well, you got to get to know every stone in this courthouse before we're through. Yes.
Y a pas de verdict encore? Non. Ah bon, OK.
You playing or not? What's the matter?
Late in the afternoon of the following day, November 13th, the jury returns with a verdict.
Est-ce que vous avez un verdict?
Oui.
Quel est votre verdict?
Non coupable.
Je peux voir la pièce?
The victory belongs as much to Shepard as it does to Morgentaler. Despite what had seemed a watertight case for the prosecution, the jury had taken less than 24 hours to acquit his client. Though he knows the Crown will appeal the jury's verdict, for the moment Shepard enjoys his triumph. As for Morgentaler, he is now a hero, surrounded by reporters and admirers.
Giant step towards the time when no more women in Canada will be victimized.
For him, the case is closed. Barely 5 months later, however, the celebration will abruptly end. Once again, Morgentaler has underestimated the opposition.
The 26th of April, I got a call from a radio station in the morning saying, Dr. Morgentaler, you had been convicted by the Court of Appeal. I said, what do you mean convicted? That's not possible. I was acquitted by a jury. I was stunned.
Never before, not in all the long history of British justice, had a jury acquittal ever been dismissed, and the conviction of a higher court substituted without a retrial. It could not have happened in the United States or in Britain or in any other country that inherited the tradition of British justice.
In your wildest imagination, did you ever think that the Court of Appeal was going to substitute a guilty verdict for the non-guilty verdict?
No, that never. Thanks. I thought the worst risk was a new trial. But no, that just couldn't conceive.
The ruling of the appeal court is a precedent, and so is the sentence. Not the slap on the wrist other doctors were getting, but 18 months in jail. The judge gave the reason why. It is one thing to say the law is wrong and bad. It is quite another to openly break and defy that law. The first course is that of the Democrat, the second that of the anarchist. As his last hope, Morgentaler now turns to the Supreme Court. In the fall of 1974, the 9 justices of the court agree to hear Morgentaler's appeal.
Yes, I'm very confident. I hope that eventually now the time will come that the women in Canada and I personally will receive justice.
But the Supreme Court isn't concerned with Henry Morgentaler's idea of justice. It is concerned with the law. The judges conclude that the law may be foolish, it may be narrow, but only Parliament has the power to change it. By a margin of 6-3, the Supreme Court rejects Morgentaler's appeal.
I don't like it.
After months of waiting, the verdict is announced unexpectedly one afternoon. Morgentaler is on a plane at the time, and his brother Mike waits at the airport to break the news.
Okay.
Morgentaler is taken by surprise, and for once he has nothing to say. He is simply stunned. Morgentaler has been through every level of the justice system, and one by one, the doors have slammed shut. On a cold, damp March afternoon in 1975, he says goodbye to his son, Bamie. Then he goes to jail, remembering when his own father was taken away.
My mother was going there. I was permitted to visit once a week, and I never asked to go with her. And I think I was afraid that if they had caught me, they could have arrested me as well. I was a member of the Jewish Socialist youth group. And that also reinforced my idea I was a coward. Like, I never asked my mother to go and see my father. I was scared. I know now I was scared. The traumatic thing for me in particular was that the report I had was that my father was taken out of prison, probably shot or executed or sent to concentration camp, and he died on my birthday. I was dreading the prospect that he was going to be shot, he was going to be executed. I expected the worst, and the worst happened.
through the months of imprisonment, Morgentaler remains convinced of his innocence.
I never had the feeling of breaking the law. On the contrary, I had the feeling that I was doing something great, unique, in the sense of helping
Okay, Henry,
people
but
who
that
needed
was
help.
that was your feeling. But in
Yes.
fact, though, you had broken the law.
No, I don't believe that. In fact, I was acquitted. When I came before a jury and I said, this is what I have done, this is why I have done it, they have acquitted me. So I have not broken the law. Here I was here in that prison, in spite of the fact that the jury had acquitted me. And I was very aware of the fact that I was here unjustly, not because I had done anything wrong.
As the law stood at that time, though, the judge had the right to overturn that jury verdict and did, and you had gone to the Supreme Court and you had ended up here. You had gone through the justice system in Canada to the very highest level and they had found you guilty.
Yeah, well, that was a fluke.
In order to prove it wasn't a fluke, Justice Minister Jérôme Choquette orders a second trial. Early one morning, Morgentaler is brought from prison.
That he's facing these additional charges of abortion is a surprise. Last month, the Quebec Justice Minister, Jérôme Choquette, said Dr. Morgentaler would not have to face additional charges. So that those charges are being prosecuted now remains somewhat of a mystery.
With the second trial, the battle suddenly shifts into a new arena.
Don't give up!
This time, the issue is not abortion.
Don't give up!
It is a citizen's rights before the law.
When the Morgentaler case first came up almost 2 years ago, all groups in his defense wanted one thing: repeal of the Canadian abortion laws. But now, as the case becomes more and more complex, the groups are becoming involved in a whole new fight, a legal fight, which will probably be a whole new precedent in Canadian legal history. Jason Moskowitz, CBC News, Montreal.
Morgentaler's second trial begins late in May of 1975. Though he's been in and out of the Palais de Justice at least 100 times over the last 5 years, this time he gets to come in through the special entrance, the one reserved for defendants who are already behind bars.
Shepard advised me to plead guilty. He said, look, Henry, you're convicted already. It cost you more money. You don't have money. They got you by the balls. I think I can arrange that you get a concurrent sentence, which means you won't get more than the 18 months that you got. I said, never will I plead guilty. Never, 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 never. I haven't committed any crime. You're going to see, you're going to win.
Morgentaler is right.
Non coupable.
Though the judge virtually orders them to convict, it takes the jury less than an hour this time to find him not guilty. As one of the jurors tells a reporter, the judge is not the Pope, you know. Immediately after the trial, Morgentaler is taken back to prison to finish serving his sentence.
Another trial. I think I'll be acquitted again in another trial.
A few days later, Mike brings his brother the news that Choquette has ordered a third trial.
All that shit again.
What can you do? Anyhow, how's the food?
On the outside, however, the news of a third trial arouses a storm of protest. The case is finally raised in Parliament by no less than John Diefenbaker, who, like others, wants an explanation of how a man can be acquitted twice and still end up in prison.
Do people who want to change the law have to look forward to legal bills of hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of their time?
The price is even higher because some, as Dr. Morgentaler, end up in jail. You have to remember, all that was done very consciously. He decided to wage a battle.
One night, Morgentaler stubbornly refuses a guard's order and is thrown into the hole. Left alone in the hole, Morgentaler suffers a mild heart attack. And when a guard finally notices, the doctor is rushed by ambulance to a nearby hospital. News of the incident leaks out. The publicity makes Morgentaler seem even more of a martyr.
Dr. Morgentaler has been acquitted by 2 jury verdicts. The Quebec government has served notice that it will appeal the second verdict. In addition to that, the Quebec government has served notice that Dr. Morgentaler still must face 10 charges related to abortion. Ron LaPlante, CBC News, at the Granby General Hospital.
When he is well enough to travel, Morgentaler is taken to a nursing home in Montreal to serve the rest of his sentence. For Morgentaler, the nursing home is even worse than prison. Though at first anti-abortionists march in protest outside the nursing home, Morgentaler is no longer much of a target. And after a while, they drift off one by one, leaving Morgentaler alone on the sidelines. But Morgentaler is not altogether forgotten. In Parliament, the debate over his treatment continues until a new federal justice minister, Ron Basford, responds with a piece of legislation to ensure that never again will a higher court overrule a jury acquittal and substitute its own guilty verdict. In his honor, it will be called the Morgentaler Amendment. But it will come too late to do Dr. Henry Morgentaler any good. Morgentaler is finally released in February of 1976 after serving 10 months of his sentence. 2 months later, he is back in the Palais de Justice. The case of Verona Parkinson, it seems, is still not finished. Basford has offered a new trial to give Morgentaler a chance to clear his name, and Morgentaler accepts. The trial begins on April the 12th and ends as expected.
Non coupable, votre honneur.
24 hours for the first jury, 6 hours for the second, barely 1 hour for the last.
I think it's an enormous tribute to the independence of the jury system and its importance that here, in a highly unpopular situation, with judges who pretty well told them to convict, and knowing that these juries really didn't sympathize with my client, they still acquitted him 3 times.
Though Jérôme Choquette is still threatening to try Morgentaler on the 10 outstanding charges, he and his party will be unseated in a provincial election. The new Minister of Justice, Marc-André Bédard, writes the federal government to say that the abortion law can no longer be enforced in the province of Quebec. Bédard's letter to Ottawa is never answered.
Je n'ai jamais reçu de réponse à cette lettre que j'ai envoyée aux autorités fédérales.
The one failure of this entire adventure was that the federal government did not take up the challenge. It preferred to let Quebec refuse to enforce the law and look the other way.
For the time being, Morgentaler's fighting days are over.
I think, in a sense, over the years, I have atoned for my guilt, if you like. I've done things that my father would have approved of, that my mother would have approved of. And when I was in prison, or first time I was in prison, or after I felt I have achieved so much, I was sort of having a dialogue with my father and mother. I said, well, you can be proud of me.
In the end, what finally do you think was the significance of the Morgentaler affair for the justice system of Canada?
I think it demonstrated the incredible contribution of the jury system to humanizing and changing the law. I think, secondly, it demonstrated that there comes a point where citizens will revolt against absurd or unenforceable laws. I think the third great lesson is that a determined individual, ready to make the sacrifices and risk his freedom, can set the system on its ears, force people to face issues that they don't want to face.
3 juries, one after another, upheld Morgentaler's campaign to make abortions freely available in the province of Quebec. But more important in the long run, his case upheld the right of a citizen to challenge the law and be judged by a jury of his peers. Yet the price of Morgentaler's civil disobedience has been high. $300,000 in legal bills, a year in jail, and an unmeasurable cost to his personal life. Morgentaler, however, is a survivor. He remarries and starts a new family. And in 1983, 13 years after the first raid, he takes up the crusade once again, opening abortion clinics in Ontario and Manitoba. In each province, the Attorney General warns that the government will have no choice but to respond.